There's a peculiar kind of silence that falls after a lifetime of noise. Not the peaceful quiet of an empty house at dawn, but the ringing void left behind when you finally stop screaming into a pillow. For 60 years, I was a mother, a wife, a caregiver, a planner, a bookkeeper, a silent partner, the sturdy, unseen foundation upon which everyone else built their lives. And I thought that was my purpose. I thought that was love. But love, I've learned, doesn't demand you set yourself on fire to keep others warm. It doesn't ask you to shrink so others can grow. And it most certainly does not raise a hand to you on your 80th birthday. My daughter called me a monster. She stood in my husband's study, a room he built with his own hands, her face twisted with a rage I had never seen, and she used that word. Monster. And in the ringing silence that followed the slap, a strange and terrible clarity washed over me. I finally saw it all. And I knew what I had to do. This isn't a story about revenge, not really. It's about reclamation. It's the story of how I took back 80 years of my own life, piece by piece, starting with a single, antique gold bracelet. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever been told your needs don't matter, then stay with me. Subscribe to my channel, and let me tell you how I stopped being a ghost in my own home, and finally learned to live. The party was Evelyn's idea, of course. Everything that required a public display of family unity was always Evelyn's idea. My 80th birthday. It sounds like a milestone, doesn't it? A grand achievement. For me, it felt more like the final page of a long book I wasn't sure I had enjoyed reading. Evelyn had insisted on a catered affair at the house. "We have to celebrate you, Mom," she'd said, her voice dripping with that saccharine sweetness she used when she wanted something. It was never about celebrating me, it was about performing the role of the devoted daughter for her friends, her husband's business partners, all the people whose opinions she valued far more than mine. I watched the preparations from my armchair, a silent observer in the flurry of my own life. Strange men carried in tables and chairs, a florist arranged towering displays of lilies, a flower I've always disliked for its cloying, funereal scent, and a catering staff took over my kitchen, the one where I'd taught Evelyn to bake, where I'd made 10,000 meals filled with a love she had long since stopped tasting. My husband, Robert, had been gone for 5 years, and the house felt cavernous without him. But on that day, it was filled with the hollow chatter of people I barely knew. They would come up to me, press a glass of champagne I didn't want into my hand, and say, 80 years. You don't look a day over 60, their eyes gliding right past me to find someone more important to talk to. I was a prop. The guest of honor, and the least important person in the room. I wore a simple blue dress, the color of a twilight sky, and on my wrist, I wore Robert's last gift to me. It was a gold bracelet, not ostentatious, but heavy with a comfortable weight. It was made of intricately woven strands of gold, and the clasp was a small, smooth plate. To anyone else, it was just a piece of old jewelry. To me, it was a promise. Robert had given it to me on our 50th wedding anniversary. He'd held my hand, his own calloused and warm, and said, "This is for you, Clara. So you never forget your worth. So you never forget you are a treasure in your own right." At the time, I thought it was just sentiment. I didn't understand the depth of his foresight. I didn't realize he was arming me for a battle he knew was coming, one he wouldn't be here to fight for me. I just smiled and let him fasten it around my wrist, where it had remained ever since. The slap didn't come out of nowhere. Violence like that never does. It's the final, desperate eruption of a long-simmering pressure. The party was in full swing, a symphony of clinking glasses and forced laughter, when Evelyn approached me. She had that tight, brittle smile on her face, the one that meant she was frustrated but determined to maintain appearances. "Mom," she said, her voice a low hiss, "can I see you in the study for a moment?" The study was Robert's sanctuary. It smelled of old books, leather, and his pipe tobacco, a scent I'd preserved like a sacred relic. It was the heart of the house, the place where real conversations happened. I followed her in, and she closed the heavy oak door behind us, instantly muting the party noise to a dull thrum. The room was dark, save for a small desk lamp that cast long shadows on the walls. On the polished surface of Robert's desk lay a sheaf of papers and a pen. I knew, instantly, that this was not a birthday surprise. "What is this, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she straightened the papers, tapping them into a neat stack. "It's nothing to worry about, Mom. It's just some legal stuff." A formality, she slid them towards me. I didn't need to read the heading to know what it was. Durable power of attorney. "We just need to get things in order," she continued, her tone patronizing, as if explaining something to a child. "You're 80 now. We need to be practical. This just allows me to help you manage things, pay your bills, make decisions if, you're not able to." My gaze fell on the bracelet on my wrist. I twisted it gently, the cool, familiar weight a small anchor in the rising storm. "I am perfectly able to manage my own affairs, Evelyn," I said, keeping my voice even. Her jaw tightened. "Mom, don't be difficult. My financial advisor said this is the most sensible step. It protects your assets. It protects the family legacy, your inheritance," she meant. She didn't say it, but the words hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. The house. The business shares Robert had left me. She saw them as hers, delayed only by the inconvenient fact of my continued existence. "The answer is no," I said. It was perhaps the first time in her adult life I had given her a flat, non-negotiable refusal without a lengthy, apologetic explanation. Her perfectly made-up face contorted. The mask of the devoted daughter slipped, revealing the grasping, entitled woman beneath. "No? What do you mean, no? I have organized this entire party for you. I take care of everything. And you can't do this one simple thing for me. For us." "This is not for me," I said softly. "This is for you," and that's when she broke. "You are so selfish," she spat, her voice rising to a shrill shriek. "So unbelievably selfish. All I do is try to help you, to secure our future, and you fight me every step of the way. You're just sitting here, in this big empty house, hoarding everything Robert built." The word struck me, but it was the one that came next that shattered the world. She stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You're a monster, Mom. A selfish, stubborn old monster," and then her hand flew. The crack of it echoed in the silent study. My head snapped to the side, my cheek stinging with a hot, sharp pain that seemed to radiate through my entire body. Time stopped. The dull thrum of the party outside vanished. The scent of Robert's pipe tobacco faded. All that existed was the fire on my skin and the word monster echoing in the cavern of my skull. I slowly turned my head back to look at her. She was breathing heavily, her hand still raised slightly, a look of shock on her own face, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just done. But there was no remorse there. Not yet. Only the fury of a spoiled child, who had finally been denied what she believed was hers. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply raised my hand, my fingers trembling slightly, and touched my cheek. It was a clinical, detached motion. I looked at my daughter, the baby I had nursed, the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the woman whose life I had subsidized, and I saw a stranger. A hostile stranger. In that moment, 60 years of excuses and justifications evaporated. The slap wasn't just a physical act, it was a final, brutal declaration. It told me I was no longer a mother in her eyes. I was an obstacle. An obstacle that now had a stinging red handprint on its cheek. In the hours and days that followed, I became a creature of pure observation. The hurt was a physical thing, a deep, resonant ache behind my ribs, but it was accompanied by a chilling, almost supernatural clarity. After Evelyn left the study, stumbling over a half-baked apology about stress and worry, I locked the door. I didn't rejoin the party. I sat in Robert's leather chair, the cool material a comfort against my back, and I let the silence settle. My hand rested on my wrist, my thumb tracing the woven pattern of the gold bracelet. It was as if the shock of the slap had shaken loose a lifetime of memories, and they began to surface, one by one, not as warm, nostalgic pictures, but as cold, hard evidence in a case I was finally building against my own heart. I remembered the early days, Robert and I in a tiny apartment, poring over invoices at the kitchen table late into the night. He was the face of the business, the brilliant craftsman, but I was the engine. I managed the books, stretched every penny, charmed the suppliers, and typed every letter. No one saw it. No one knew that his natural business acumen was bolstered by my meticulous, unpaid, 8-hour days. My name was never on the letterhead. My title was simply wife. When Evelyn was born, my world shrank to the size of her needs. I didn't mind. I embraced it. I packed her lunches with little notes, sewed her Halloween costumes by hand, stayed up all night helping her with school projects she'd left until the last minute. I was the class mom, the carpool driver, the ever-present, ever-reliable source of comfort and support. Her triumphs were my triumphs. Her pain was my pain. But where did my pain go? I remembered her 16th birthday. We weren't wealthy then, not really. We were comfortable. But she wanted a car. A brand new one, not a used one like her friends. We couldn't afford it. Robert tried to explain, but she locked herself in her room for 3 days, accusing us of loving the business more than we loved her. I was the one who finally cracked. I took the money we had been saving for a new roof and put it down as a deposit on the car. I told Robert we could manage another winter. I was the peacemaker. The enabler. I thought I was buying her happiness, but I was only funding her entitlement. The pattern repeated itself endlessly. The university tuition, followed by her demand for a proper graduation trip to Europe, which we paid for. Her wedding, a lavish affair far beyond our means, because she deserved a fairy tale, the down payment on her first house, a house much larger than she and her husband, Mark, needed. Each time, I was the one who smoothed things over with Robert, who found the money, who juggled the budgets. Each time, her thank you was fleeting, quickly replaced by the next expectation. I remembered a conversation with Robert, just a year before he passed. We were sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Clara, I worry about Evelyn. She sees people as things to be used. I worry she sees us that way." I had defended her, of course. "She's just ambitious, dear. She loves us." Robert had just sighed and squeezed my hand. "I've made sure you'll always be safe," he'd said, his eyes filled with a sadness I didn't understand at the time. "No matter what." You remember that now, sitting in his study with a throbbing cheek. I finally understood. He had seen the monster long before she named herself. He had seen the rot at the core of our family, the rot I had spent a lifetime trying to paper over with love and sacrifice. My love hadn't fixed her. It had fed the very worst parts of her. My sacrifices hadn't taught her gratitude, they had taught her that I was a resource to be endlessly depleted. The slap wasn't an aberration. It was the logical conclusion of a lifetime of me saying yes, when I should have said no. It was the price of my own silence. And as I sat there, the house finally empty and quiet, I looked at the gold bracelet, gleaming in the lamplight. It was no longer just a memento. It was a key. A weapon. A promise from a man who had loved me enough to see the truth, and to provide me with a way out. The hurt was still there, but for the first time, it had a companion, a cold, hard, unyielding resolve. The days after the birthday were a study in manipulation. Evelyn, I imagine, had conferred with her husband, Mark. They would have strategized. The initial assault had failed, so now came the campaign of emotional warfare. The text started the next morning. The first one was a masterpiece of faux contrition. Mom, I am so sorry about what happened. I was just so stressed and worried about you. I love you so much. I read it and felt nothing. The words were hollow, a script she was reading from. I deleted it without replying. The silence from my end clearly unnerved her. The next text arrived a few hours later. Mom, please answer me. I'm getting really worried. Are you okay? Did you fall? The implication was clear. My silence couldn't be a choice. It must be a symptom of my age, my frailty. I was the elderly, confused mother who needed her daughter's sharp-witted intervention. I deleted that one, too. I didn't feel angry anymore. The searing heat of the insult had cooled into a solid, clear block of ice in my chest. I spent those days in a kind of cocoon. I disconnected the landline phone, letting the answering machine pick up her increasingly frantic messages. Mom, this isn't funny. Pick up the phone. Mark and I are thinking of driving over if we don't hear from you. I moved through my house, not with sadness, but with the dispassionate eye of an appraiser. I looked at the furniture we had bought together, the photos on the mantelpiece, the garden I had tended for 50 years. I was detaching myself from it all, piece by piece. It wasn't my home anymore, it was a stage set for a play that had closed. The turning point came on the third day. I was in the attic, looking for an old photo album, when I found a small, locked metal box. It was Robert's. I had the key on my main keyring, a small, unassuming brass key I'd always thought was for a long-lost shed or piece of luggage. I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was not jewelry or cash, but a simple, folded piece of paper. It was a letter from Robert, written in his familiar, strong hand. It was dated 6 months before he died. My dearest Clara, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and it probably means you are facing a difficult choice regarding Evelyn. I hope with all my heart that I am wrong about her, that her character has softened, that she has learned to love you for who you are and not for what you have. But in my heart of hearts, I fear I am not wrong. I have watched her for years. She has a hole inside her that no amount of money or possessions will ever fill, and she will not hesitate to consume you to try and fill it. I have spent my life protecting you, and I intend to continue doing so, even from the grave. The bracelet I gave you is more than just gold, my love. And Mr. Davies at the law firm holds more than just our will. He holds the truth. He holds your independence. Do not be afraid to use it. Your happiness is the only legacy I ever truly cared about. Don't let anyone, not even our own child, take that from you. Live your life, Clara. Live it for yourself. All my love, always. Robert. I read the letter twice, then a third time, the tears I hadn't shed for the slap finally coming. They weren't tears of sadness or self-pity. They were tears of profound, aching gratitude. He had seen me. He had known me, completely. He had validated every quiet fear I had ever pushed down, every uneasy feeling I had ever ignored. He had given me permission to save myself. I folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and locked it. I went downstairs, my steps firm, my purpose clear. The ice in my chest was no longer just a block, it was a sharpened tool. I walked to the phone, reconnected the cord, and dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. The receptionist answered on the second ring. Davies, Finch, and Associates. Yes, I said, my voice steady and clear. My name is Clara Whitehall. I need to make an appointment with Mr. Davies. Tell him it's about the bracelet. Walking into Mr. Davis' office felt like stepping into a different timeline. It was a world of quiet competence, of mahogany and leather-bound books, a world where facts mattered more than feelings, and where contracts were more binding than blood. Mr. Davies, a man now in his late 60s with kind eyes and a shock of white hair, had been Robert's lawyer and friend for over 40 years. He greeted me not with pity, but with a respectful gravity. "Clara," he said, ushering me into his private office. "It is good to see you, though I suspect the circumstances are not pleasant." He didn't press. He simply sat behind his large desk, folded his hands, and waited. I took a deep breath. "Evelyn wants me to sign over power of attorney," I began. There was an altercation at my birthday party. She has become insistent." I didn't need to give him the sordid details of the slap. The tightening of his jaw told me he understood completely. He had seen this coming, too. "Robert anticipated this," he said gently. "He hoped he was wrong." We both did. He then swiveled in his chair and turned to a large, formidable-looking safe in the corner of his office. He worked the combination, the clicks of the tumblers sounding like the unlocking of a great secret. He returned with a thick, leather-bound portfolio. He laid it on the desk between us. "Clara, what Evelyn knows of your financial situation is, to put it mildly, the tip of the iceberg." The very small, visible tip. He opened the portfolio. Inside were documents, deeds, and statements that made my head spin. For 40 years, Robert, with Mr. Davis' help, had been quietly siphoning off a percentage of the business profits, before they were ever declared as such, and investing them. He had created a blind trust in my name, a completely separate legal and financial entity. There were stocks in tech companies I'd only read about in the newspaper. Deeds to 2 small commercial properties in a neighboring state that generated a steady rental income. A portfolio of rare stamps and coins. An art collection, managed by a gallery in the city, consisting of works by emerging artists whose value had since skyrocketed. It was a fortune. A completely hidden, completely independent fortune that was legally, unequivocally, and solely mine. I stared at the papers, speechless. I had lived my life thinking we were comfortable, sometimes stretched. I had worried about the cost of a new roof, while sitting on a foundation of solid gold. Robert wanted you to have your own life, separate from the business, separate from him, and if necessary, separate from Evelyn, Mr. Davies explained. The family home is in your name alone. The shares in the company are yours to do with as you please. But this, he tapped the portfolio, this is your fortress. Evelyn has no knowledge of it. She has no claim to it. It does not exist in her world. He then pointed to a specific document. It was the charter for a charitable foundation Robert had set up. The Whitehall Foundation for Women's Independence. Its board of directors consisted of me, and only me. He thought of everything, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I looked down at the bracelet on my wrist. The smooth, cool plate of the clasp. Mr. Davies reached across the desk and gently took my hand. He produced a jeweller's loop from his drawer. "Look closely, Clara," he said. I held the clasp under the light of his desk lamp and peered through the loop. There, so tiny it was almost invisible to the naked eye, was an engraved serial number. It wasn't a safe deposit box number. "That," Mr. Davies said, "is the account number for the trust." It was Robert's little bit of theatre. He said that if you ever needed to claim your independence, you would come to me wearing this bracelet. It was our code. His way of telling me, from beyond, that it was time. He leaned back in his chair, his expression one of profound validation. "So, Clara Whitehall," he said, his tone shifting from gentle friend to sharp-witted lawyer. "The question is not what you are going to do. The question is, what would you like to do first? You hold all the cards. Every single 1 inch, and for the first time in 80 years, I felt the exhilarating, terrifying thrill of true power. The power not to control others, but to control myself. The power to choose. First, I said, a slow, determined smile spreading across my face, I think I'll cancel a credit card. The first steps were the easiest, and in some ways, the most satisfying. They were small, silent acts of rebellion carried out in the sterile, impersonal environments of banks and online portals. There was a clean, surgical feeling to it all. I was excising a cancer from my life, and the process began with a simple signature. Mr. Davies had given me a checklist, a strategic roadmap to my own liberation. The first item was consolidate and secure personal finances. I went to my local bank branch, the one where the tellers all knew me as Evelyn's mother. I sat not with a friendly teller, but with the branch manager in a glass-walled office. I presented my identification and a letter from Mr. Davies. I instructed him to close the joint savings account I shared with Evelyn. An account, I now learned from the statement he printed for me, from which she had been making regular, substantial withdrawals for household expenses, her household, not mine. The manager was professional, impassive. He clicked his keyboard. He printed a form. I signed it. A $500,000 account, which she had clearly viewed as her personal slush fund, was gone. I had the remaining balance transferred to a new account at a different bank, one opened under the umbrella of my trust. The second step was the credit cards. There was a supplementary card on my main account that I had given her years ago for emergencies. I logged into the credit card company's website, a skill I'd taught myself to keep track of my own bills. I navigated to the Manage Cards section. There was her name, Evelyn Whitehall Jones. And below it, a small, unassuming button, Deactivate Card. I clicked it. A box popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently deactivate this card? A wave of memories washed over me. Evelyn using it to buy a ridiculously expensive handbag she had to have, charging a spa day for her and her friends, paying for a lavish dinner I was not invited to. Each purchase was a small betrayal, a tiny cut I had ignored. I took a deep, cleansing breath and clicked confirm. An email notification was sent to me instantly. I knew another one was on its way to her. I pictured her, perhaps at lunch with her friends, her card being declined. The flicker of confusion, then annoyance, then dawning panic. It wasn't a gleeful thought, but a grimly satisfying one. It was the consequence she had earned. The third step of that first day was the most symbolic. I went to a new mobile phone store in a different town. I bought a new phone and got a new number. I sat in my car in the parking lot and manually transferred the numbers I wanted to keep, my doctor, my cousin in Florida, the nice young man who mowed my lawn. When I got to Evelyn, I hesitated for only a moment. Her name glowed on the screen. I thought of the texts, the voicemails, the years of one-sided conversations. Then I pressed the delete button. Her contact information vanished. It felt like erasing a ghost. I drove home with the windows down, feeling the breeze on my face. The world seemed brighter, the colors more vivid. Each small action had been a quiet declaration of self-worth. I was not a resource. I was not a utility. I was a person, and I was methodically, systematically, reclaiming the territory of my own life. That evening, I made myself a simple dinner and ate it in silence, a silence that now felt peaceful, not lonely. There were no frantic voicemails to listen to, no manipulative texts to delete. There was only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It was the sound of my new life beginning. And I knew the loudest explosions were yet to come. The credit card was just a firecracker. The house was the bomb. The next phase of my plan required a different kind of courage. It wasn't about clicking buttons or signing forms in anonymous offices. It was about letting go of the past, physically and emotionally. The house. It had been my home for 55 years. I had brought my baby daughter home from the hospital to this house. I had mourned my husband in this house. Every wall, every floorboard, was saturated with memory. But Evelyn's actions had tainted it. Her entitlement had transformed it from a sanctuary into a prize, a piece of property she was waiting to claim like a vulture circling a kill. It was no longer a home, it was a monument to a family that had ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Mr. Davies had laid out the options clearly. I could sell it. I could keep it. Or I could enact Robert's most brilliant, most poetic piece of planning. I chose Robert's plan. A few days later, I was back in Mr. Davis' office. On the table between us were the documents to create an irrevocable trust. The house, upon my death, would not go to Evelyn. It would be donated, in its entirety, to the Whitehall Foundation for Women's Independence, to be used as a transitional home for women over 60 who were starting their lives over. The irony was so potent it was almost beautiful. The very symbol of Evelyn's inheritance would become a haven for women escaping situations, just like the one she had created for me. There was a clause, of course. A life estate. It granted me the right to live in the house, peacefully and without interference, until the day I chose to leave or the day I died. But its final destination was sealed. I picked up the heavy, expensive pen Mr. Davies offered me. My hand was perfectly steady. I signed my name, Clara Whitehall, on each page. The stroke of the pen felt like a final, definitive severing. With that signature, I was disinheriting my daughter not just from a piece of property, but from the very narrative she had constructed for her life. The legal gears began to turn. A week later, a registered letter was sent from Mr. Davis' office to Evelyn's address. It was a simple, formal notification. It stated that the ownership of the property at 127 Willow Creek Lane had been transferred into a trust and that she, as a potential heir, was being legally notified of the change in status. Then, the real panic began. The first text, which she must have sent to my old, now deactivated number, would have gone unanswered. Then she must have called the old number, over and over, only to get a number not in service message. Her next move was predictable. She emailed me. I had kept my old email address, knowing she would use it. The subject line was Urgent Lawyer Letter. The email read, Mom, I just received a bizarre letter from some lawyer. It has to be a mistake. Or has someone gotten to you? Are you all right? People take advantage of the elderly all the time. Please call me immediately. This is not a joke. The condescension was breathtaking. The immediate assumption that I was a doddering fool, incapable of making my own decisions, being preyed upon by vultures. She couldn't conceive of a world where I was the one in control. I typed a simple, one-sentence reply. It is not a mistake, Evelyn. Everything is in order, and I hit send. The response came back in less than a minute. The tone had shifted from condescending concern to outright fury. What do you mean it's not a mistake? What have you done? You can't just give away my house. That is our family home. That is my future. You have lost your mind. I am coming over. We are going to fix this. The dam had broken. The pretense of love and concern was washed away in a torrent of pure, unadulterated greed. My house, she had written. My future, she had finally said the quiet part out loud. I read her frantic, typo-riddled email and felt a profound, deep calm. I closed my laptop. I went into the living room and began to place my most treasured photo albums into a cardboard box. I was not afraid. I was ready. The monster she had created was about to look her creator directly in the eye. The sound of her car screeching to a halt in my driveway was the overture to the final act. I heard the car door slam with a violence that echoed her state of mind. A few moments later, the doorbell began to ring, not with a polite press, but with a frantic, insistent series of jabs. When that didn't work, the pounding on the door began. "Mom? Open this door. I know you're in there. Open this door right now." Her voice was shrill, cracking with panic and rage. I took a moment. I smoothed the front of my dress. I walked to the hall closet and took out a small, sturdy box filled with Robert's old pipes and another with my grandmother's china teacups. I was in the middle of packing, you see. Not everything. Just the things that held memories untainted by her. Just the things that belonged to Clara, not to Mom. Finally, after letting her rage against the solid oak of the front door for a few more minutes, I walked over and opened it. She practically fell into the hallway, her face flushed, her hair disheveled. Her husband, Mark, a man whose spine seemed to be made of jelly, hovered behind her on the porch, looking deeply uncomfortable. Evelyn's eyes, wild and furious, scanned the hallway and landed on the packing boxes. "What is this?" she demanded, gesturing at them. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" "I'm tidying up," I said, my voice calm and even. It seemed to infuriate her more than shouting would have. "Tidying up? You're giving away my house and you call it tidying up," she shrieked. "Your house, Evelyn?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I don't recall seeing your name on the deed. Robert put this house in my name, and my name alone, 50 years ago." This was news to her. I could see it in the flicker of confusion in her eyes. She had always assumed it was joint property, something that would automatically become hers. "That doesn't matter," she stammered, recovering. "It's the family home. It's my birthright. You can't just give it to some charity for old ladies." "I can," I said simply. "And I have. It's done. It's irrevocable." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The reality of her powerlessness was beginning to sink in, and it was a poison she couldn't spit out. "Why?" she finally whispered, the anger momentarily replaced by a raw, desperate bewilderment. "After everything I've done for you. The party. Checking in on you." "The party was for you, Evelyn," I interrupted, my voice still quiet, but now edged with steel. "The checking in was surveillance. You weren't caring for your mother. You were guarding your investment." Mark finally spoke up, stepping forward with a placating gesture. "Now, Clara," he began, using that familiar, patronizing tone. "Let's all just calm down." "I'm sure Evelyn didn't mean Mark," I said, cutting him off with a look so cold it stopped him in his tracks. "This is a conversation between my daughter and me. Your opinion is neither required nor welcome." He shrank back, his purpose as a useless accessory fulfilled. Evelyn's desperation curdled back into rage. "You're doing this to punish me. Because of a stupid argument." I said I was sorry. "You were sorry you got caught," I corrected her. "You were sorry I didn't sign your papers. But you weren't sorry for the slap, Evelyn. Or for the word you used." "I was stressed," she wailed, the tears finally coming, hot and theatrical. "You don't know the pressure I'm under. We have commitments. We were counting on this house. You've ruined everything." "No," I said, my voice dropping to an almost whisper, forcing her to lean in, to listen closely. "You ruined everything. You took a mother's love and you treated it like a bank account. You saw my life not as a gift, but as a deadline for your inheritance. You stood in your father's study and you called me a monster. And you know what, Evelyn? You were right. You finally pushed me so far that I had to become one. A monster of self-preservation. A monster who is finally putting herself first." I walked past her to the table where I had left my purse and my car keys. I picked them up. "This conversation is over," I said. "You should go," she screeched. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house." "No, dear," I said, turning to face her one last time. "It's my house. And I'm asking you to leave." She just stood there, stunned into silence, the tears drying on her blotchy face. The monster had spoken. And the monster was not backing down. The final act of the confrontation was quieter, but in many ways, more devastating for her. She stood there in my hallway, refusing to move, a stubborn child in a 45-year-old woman's body. Her rage had collapsed into a sullen, wounded silence. She was waiting for me to fix it, just as I always had. She was waiting for me to say, "All right, dear, let's sit down and talk this through," and then slowly, inevitably, concede everything. But that woman was gone. The woman who stood before her now was a stranger. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply walked past her into the living room, picked up my new phone, from which her number had been purged, and dialed. She watched me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Perhaps she thought I was calling Mr. Davies to reverse the trust. "Yes, hello," I said into the phone, my voice pleasant and firm. "I have a non-emergency situation. There are some individuals at my home who are refusing to leave. I would like to have them escorted from my property." The color drained from Evelyn's face. Mark, who had been lingering by the door, looked horrified. "You're calling the police?" Evelyn whispered, aghast. "On your own family?" I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "You slapped me, Evelyn. You tried to seize control of my assets. You screamed at me in my own home and refused to leave when asked. At what point in that sequence of events did you still consider yourself family in any protective sense of the word?" I turned my attention back to the phone. "Yes, 127, Willow Creek Lane." "Thank you. I'll be waiting outside." I hung up. I picked up my purse and the box of Robert's pipes. "I'll wait on the porch," I said to her, as if discussing the weather. "I suggest you and Mark are gone before they arrive. It would be terribly embarrassing for you to have to explain this to your friends." That was the final blow. The threat of public humiliation. It was the only language she truly understood. She stared at me, her mind scrambling to find some angle, some piece of leverage she still held over me. She found nothing. There was no emotional hook left for her to grasp. I had systematically removed every single one. Her eyes fell to my wrist. "That bracelet," she said, her voice suddenly small. "Dad gave you that. He loved family. He would hate what you're doing." It was her last, pathetic shot. And it was the opening I had been waiting for. I held up my arm, letting the woven gold catch the light. "You're right," I said, my voice soft and clear. "He did give me this. And yes, he loved family. He loved me so much that he saw you coming, Evelyn. He saw your greed and your selfishness, and it broke his heart. He knew you would try to do exactly what you have done." I let my hand drop. This bracelet wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a message to his lawyer. It was the key to a fortress he built to protect me from you. Every penny he saved, every investment he made that you know nothing about, every legal protection he put in place. It was all to give me this. The freedom to walk away from you. Robert didn't just love family as a concept. He loved me, Clara, as a person. And his final act of love was to make sure you could never, ever hurt me again. The truth of it hit her with the force of a physical blow. The story she had told herself, that she was the cherished heir, the center of Robert's world, crumbled to dust. She was a footnote. A liability he had planned for. She finally broke. She didn't scream or rage. A dry, ragged sob escaped her lips. Mark took her by the arm. "Come on, Evie," he mumbled. "Let's just go." She let him lead her out the door, a defeated woman. I watched them get into their car and speed away. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a vast, quiet, and profound sense of peace. The storm had passed. I stood on the porch for a long time, breathing in the clean air. Then I cancelled the call to the police, went back inside, and continued to pack. A few days later, the moving van came. It wasn't a large truck. It took only my boxes of memories, my favorite armchair, my bed, and my clothes. The rest, the grand dining table, the formal living room set, the symbols of a life lived for others, I left behind. I drove away from Willow Creek Lane without a single glance in the rearview mirror. My journey took me 4 hours south, to a small coastal town where no one knew my name. My new home was a modern, 2-bedroom condominium on the 3rd floor of a clean, bright building. It wasn't a house. It was mine. The living room was a wall of glass that looked out over the endless, churning expanse of the ocean. That first night, I didn't unpack. I ordered a pizza, ate it out of the box, and sat on the floor, watching the waves crash against the shore. The sound was rhythmic, powerful, and cleansing. I fell asleep on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of the past. I slept the deep, untroubled sleep of the free. In the morning, I woke to the sun streaming through the glass. I made a cup of tea in a kitchen that was entirely my own and stepped out onto the balcony. The sea air was cool and salty. I took a deep breath that seemed to fill every part of me. I was no longer Robert's widow. I was no longer Evelyn's mother. I was simply Clara. And my life was just beginning. They call it the golden years, but for so many of us, it can feel like the twilight years, a slow fading into irrelevance. We become custodians of other people's memories, guardians of homes that will soon belong to someone else. Our identity becomes a reflection of the roles we once played: mother, wife, grandmother. The world gently, and sometimes not so gently, tells you that your story is over, that it's time to sit quietly in the epilogue. But my story hadn't ended. It had just been waiting for me to pick up the pen and write the next chapter myself. Today, my life is blissfully, beautifully simple. I wake up when I want to. I drink my tea on the balcony and watch the pelicans dive for their breakfast. Some mornings I walk on the beach, letting the cold water froth around my ankles. I've joined a book club, filled with intelligent, funny women who talk about politics and art and travel, not about their children's inheritances. I'm taking a watercolor class at the local community center. My first paintings are terrible, blotchy messes of color, but they are mine. They are joyful and imperfect, and I hang them on my walls with pride. I volunteer at the library twice a week, reading stories to children. Their open, trusting faces are a balm to my soul. They don't want anything from me except the sound of my voice and the magic of a good story. I give it to them gladly. I have not heard from Evelyn. Mr. Davies handles the occasional, desperate email she sends, all of which are inquiries about her father's assets. There is never a question about my well-being. There is never an apology that rings true. The last I heard, she and Mark had to sell their oversized house and downsize significantly. The stream had run dry. I feel no satisfaction in this, only a distant, clinical sadness for the woman she chose to become. The gold bracelet still sits on my wrist. It's no longer a key to a fortress or a weapon for a coming battle. Now, it's just what Robert always intended it to be, a reminder. A reminder of a love that was wise and true. A reminder that my worth is inherent and not dependent on anyone else's validation. A reminder that it is never, ever too late to claim your own life. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, I think about that word she used. Monster. Perhaps I am. Perhaps a woman who chooses her own peace over her child's greed is a monster in the eyes of an entitled world. Perhaps a woman who refuses to be consumed, who refuses to wither away quietly, is a terrifying creature. If so, then it is a title I will wear with honor. Because this monster is peaceful. This monster is happy. This monster is finally, incandescently, free. I wanted to share this story with all of you because I know I am not alone. I know there are so many of you out there who have been made to feel small, who have been treated as a convenience or a stepping stone. So I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to make a choice between your own well-being and the expectations of your family? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if my journey has resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. Let's continue to share these stories of strength, because sometimes, the quietest revolutions begin with a single, whispered word, no.